Welcome to another episode of A Pint With Seaniebee, the podcast. We're here in New York on a cold winter's afternoon. I'm in the apartment of a very good friend of mine called Elaine Purcell. She's Irish, and we've known each other for, would you believe, 7 years, I think, or
give or
8
take
years. Elaine has a number of good stories. Not only is she a great raconteur, but she's led a very full life, in my opinion. She's not afraid, and she really marches to her own drum. So we're sitting down, and actually it's January and I'm not drinking, so the Pint With Seaniebee is close to a pint of tea.
Milky tea.
Two Irish people sitting down for a cup of milky tea. Our parents would be very happy with us.
I wouldn't have it any other way.
That's the sound effect of me drinking my tea. All right, Elaine, so you're from a south of Ireland.
Yeah, little town in Waterford called Ballygunner. That's right.
What was it like growing up there as a child?
Ballygunner is about 10 miles from Dunmore East, which is probably my favourite place in the whole world. It's a really sort of... Dunmore East is classically a working class fishing village, as you would expect.
Right.
Absolutely beautiful and gorgeous.
Yeah. Quaint.
Oh, so lovely. I mean, there's loads of little thatched cottages and there's little hills, so if you go up onto the hill you can see down into the harbour and the coves. We used to spend all our summers out there. We'd rent a house. My sister, who I'll talk more about I'm sure, Orla, as a child she got diabetes, and so we weren't allowed travel very far from the hospital.
Right.
Amazingly, yeah. Like if you she's probably 30 this year, and she was diagnosed at 4.
Oh my God.
And she was a really sort of challenging type 1 diabetic. And so we weren't allowed to get in a plane as a family.
So injecting yourself with insulin all the time?
4 times a day, and
Wow.
she would have hypos and hypers and the whole shebang.
God.
Yeah, and so it was a sort of a relatively new disease. Now it's sort of you take it in your stride.
Yeah.
And so because of that, we ended up sort of vacationing, as they would say here, locally. My dad would stay working all summer, but the whole house would sort of migrate out to Dunmore and rent a house or a cottage out by the sea.
And what was your dad?
So my dad's self-employed. He's an auctioneer.
Okay. So you probably got the house cheap.
Brown envelope sort of. Yeah, and him and my brother now actually work together. My brother's gone into the business.
How many siblings have you got?
Oh God, they're great. I have 2 sisters and an older brother. I often say I have terrible middle child syndrome.
Right. You're not really, there's 2 middle children.
Exactly, yeah. And I'm the oldest girl, so I get a lot of that sort of first child overachieverness.
Three-quarters.
Yeah, and then a lot of that middle child sort of neediness.
Right. And what about your mum?
Yeah, Mum's great. Mum's Jackie. She's a weird duck, like, in that she was this incredibly innovative, sort of driven woman. She travelled way before my dad ever did. She was heading off out to Spain and Palma and Mallorca, and
This would be in the 60s.
Without a lick of Spanish.
Was she hot?
Oh, she's gorgeous. Yeah, she's gorgeous. She's still.
And what was she doing when she was going out to?
Joe somebody travel insurance.
Joe
So she was a
Walsh.
rep. Joe Walsh Travel, yeah.
Joe Walsh Tours.
So she was a rep. Yeah. And so she'd work with him in a package tour. So she'd be the woman, when you'd get off the plane, she'd take you from the airport.
Breed.
Yeah, totally, yeah. Then she met my dad, and then...
Did she meet him when he was over on holidays?
No, they met in a bar. My mum and dad, my grandparents were publicans.
Right.
And so she was working...
Where was the pub?
In Arundel Square in Waterford.
And so they're both from Waterford?
No, he's from Offaly. So
okay.
He moved to Waterford to set up the business.
Okay.
But so she then, set up her own business as well. So she was very much an entrepreneur in her own right. And then when the 4 kids arrived, she really had to put the brakes on it to a certain extent.
Right. So does she still, now that you're all grown up, is she getting her party boots back on?
Yeah, in a totally different way. She's actually like more... she goes to the places that she used to always go to, and she'd even ring up the hotel and say, I really like that room from last time, can I have the same room again?
Like from 1963. Do you still have the corner room?
Exactly, on the 11th floor. Yeah. But she's had this amazing renaissance in her life now. You'd ring Mum and she's like, I can't talk to you, I'll ring you Monday. I'm like, this will be Tuesday. And she'd have bridge on Tuesday night, Spanish. She does Spanish. She's done Spanish for 20 years now, I'd say, nearly. Cooking classes, art classes. She's that classic boomer now who's had a second sort of renaissance on life.
Brilliant.
Yeah, she's great.
Did you go to college in Ireland?
Yeah, so I did my degree in the University of Limerick.
Right. Limerick is also known as Stab City. It's hopefully I probably won't get stabbed next time I go back to Ireland for saying that, but it's where Angela's Ashes and Frank McCourt and all that kind of stuff came from, and it's a pretty grubby and very tricky town to live in, and noted for its violence. And I'd probably be losing listeners from Limerick for saying that, because they're very touchy about it, aren't they?
I think it's come out of that dark period. I mean, it was definitely Stab City when I was there.
Yeah.
I think it's had a bit of
notice though, Stab City, not Gun City.
No.
You know, so, when you talk about America's gun control problems, when you think about back home in the day, if there was two guys having a fight in the pub, one guy would go home and get a stick and try and beat the other guy.
That's
but he wouldn't kill him.
No. I think some of that comes from how our police aren't armed.
Yeah.
We don't have a gun culture in Ireland in the same way.
Yeah.
But
so how was Limerick living there?
Limerick was great. I mean, I was there for 4 years and we were out in Castletroy, and it's sort of contained as a little student environment. So, you know, you might go in and out of the city maybe once or twice a week, but we were in a really sort of gated community. What
were you studying?
A degree in marketing and French.
Okay.
But there, I mean,
Did you speak French?
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah. I used to go to France every summer for 3 or 4 summers before my leaving cert for the whole summer.
Okay.
I was just mad for road.
And so you got your degree in that, and then what did you do?
So as part of University of Limerick, it's actually based on a US model. They have a work experience program where I was sent off to Canada, which was brilliant. I worked for Tourism Ireland for nearly a year over in Toronto.
Okay.
And then I met this really wonderful professor. His name is Maurice Patterson, and he was teaching consumer behaviour. Mm-hmm. I'd never really considered advertising as a path. And so, as part of his course, he introduced me to Kevin Roberts, and who was CEO of Saatchi and Saatchi.
Who also hired me back in the day.
That's right, yeah. So as much as actually we only know each other for 6 or 7 years, our paths crossed way before
then.
There's
an unfortunate link with Kevin Roberts.
Yeah. So I met him, and I decided literally then and there I wanted to work for him. This would have been 2003. And I applied to Saatchi London, and they didn't want to bar me.
So when you met Kevin, where was that? Like at some conference he was speaking at?
He came to Limerick to give a talk. Yeah, would you believe? Yeah, he came to the UL.
Oh, okay. So it was one of those things where he came to Limerick, and then there was like you just went up to him and said, "What's the crack?" And you were very impressed.
I was just totally enamoured by the sort of the emotion that he brought to all his storytelling, and how he just managed to make advertising feel like this thing that you were controlling or influencing culture, not controlling culture, but having an influence on it in a way that I had never really grasped. I wasn't selling something.
Yeah.
I was influencing culture. And that just was like, my mind was blown. Yeah. And I thought, I want to work for him.
So you got a job in America, was it?
No. So I moved to Sydney. There was a program that they were doing, like an internship. I applied to that. I didn't get it. Mm-hmm. And then I decided that the stuff that Maurice Patterson had been teaching me was so interesting, I wanted to go and learn more about it.
Right.
And so I essentially did a master's in consumer behaviour.
Ah, okay.
And that was
that would have been...
That was amazing. It was really good.
You'd been riding the first wave on that.
Yeah. And then that's where I joined.
So how did that take you to Sydney?
Oh, yeah. Not obviously, no. I just... You know when you have... I had always been somebody who wanted to get the F out of Ireland as quickly as possible.
So tell me why that was.
I wanted to get the F out of Waterford, and then I wanted to get the fuck out of...
Okay, let's start with Waterford. Why Waterford? Too small?
I just felt like there was more. There was always more. It just wasn't enough. Like, it didn't feel diverse enough. It didn't feel curious enough.
Yeah.
And I still, to this day, sort of struggle with sometimes the small-mindedness of things that are really actually not a big deal at all.
I agree. There's twitching curtains, and there's also this thing of people with ambition get cut down. I mean, the Aussies have it; they call it tall poppy. But I had the same reason. I mean, I lived in Dublin, the big smoke. You know, that's where all the cool people hung. But it was still just this feeling that anybody who wanted to not go into work in a bank or go into law or go into work in the government or whatever, you were weird. And it was like, what are you doing that for? You'll never make a movie, or you'll never be anything, you know. Just stay in conversation.
And there's nothing wrong with going into law. It just wasn't what I wanted to do.
There's this just traditional thing of be a builder. I'm not picking up law. I'm just saying do something that your father's father did and your father's, you know, do something that's normal.
Yeah.
Don't try. And I mean, you hear a lot of that from people who in Ireland around our time.
Yeah.
Even probably now, although I don't feel it's the same now, because I feel the generation now they have so much technology at their hands, and they have so much access to the world that they can go, I can do that, or I give it a go. And there's not the same fear instilled of if you fail. I don't think we can come back to that later.
Yeah.
So anyway, you want to get the F out of Ireland, and then you want to get the F out of where? Europe or Dublin? Or
well, it just, you know, when you look at your options and you think, right, if I go and do a master's degree, what can I do?
Yeah.
And so you start to say, London's too close, or it was mentally at the time. America's too expensive. I'd already lived in Canada.
Yeah.
And so then you start to look at the other, like maybe I could have gone to France because I had done my degree in French, but I ended up looking around at New Zealand and the University of Otago down in the South Island, or the University of New South Wales. They both offered a programme that I thought was really interesting.
Okay.
And as trite as it sounds, I just really wanted to live by the sea. And and I loved the sea. And then I ended up in Coogee, which is by the sea, and I lived there for 4 years.
You loved it when you got there?
I loved it.
Yeah. And so you were going
and actually, do you know what? No, maybe I shouldn't say that. I loved it, but there was definitely moments where I was really lonely and homesick, and everybody thought you were living the most phenomenal dream. Yeah. And like, you miss your friends and you miss your family and you miss the fella who you were totally in love with before you left. And that's really shit.
But I think that makes you. I mean, I think that the idea of going so far away. To your point about London, if you got homesick in London, you're on a Ryanair flight for $60 and you're home in Ballygunner, and the fact that you're so far away means you have to get on with it. And you learn a lot more about who you are and about your life out there. Were you in college out there?
Yeah.
For
1 year.
1 year. Okay.
1 year masters, and so I will never forget the day on my birthday on June 10th. I had applied to Saatchi's as soon as I got there,
right?
And I was just committed, like I was absolutely determined. And so I applied to Saatchi's, and on June 10th they phoned me up and said, "Yeah, we'll hire you. We have a project essentially as an intern." I'd never worked in an ad agency in my life. Yeah.
So that was your first job?
Absolutely, I'll never forget it.
And you were earning buttons, were you?
Loads of money. Oh no, I was earning absolutely pennies because I was on a student visa and you're only allowed to work 20 hours a week.
Okay.
But that's horseshit, as you know. Yeah. They could only pay you for 20 hours a week, but you could work 50, 60 hours if you wanted.
And do they look after you?
Certain people did. Yeah, very much so. I mean, the woman who ultimately has, I think, helped to course correct my career, steer my career, was Mary Mills. She moved. Well. Yeah, I had dinner with her on Tuesday. Okay. Yeah, so I saw...
Hi, Mary, if you're listening.
So she took me under her wing, and she taught me and she trained me.
So then at some point you had to get, like, they said to you, "You're good, we're keeping you," yeah?
Yeah, it's sort of a windy road because you know what it's like with visas and like, "Oh, we'll keep you," "No, we won't." And so then I took off, left Saatchi's, and took off up the east coast, across Darwin, got to Broome, and then went down the west coast.
Brilliant.
Amazing. Jesus, Mary and Joseph.
How were you travelling?
Oh, sure, on a shoestring. By bus, you'd pick up a car, somebody had a friend, you'd fly maybe a little bit. But
it's mad out there, isn't it?
It's unbelievable. It's so brilliant.
So tell me why it was so brilliant.
I'll never forget, we were in Exmouth, which is over on the west coast.
Yeah.
We just pulled into Exmouth, and I had done the east coast and done the Great Barrier Reef, for example. And we got there, and it was like the undiscovered Great Barrier Reef. And we took off out in a boat.
Well, as soon as you turn left from Port Douglas and keep going, you're in absolute bandit
country. Bandit.
Crocodile, mosquito country. And Darwin is still like something out of Deadwood, right?
Oh, you could, I mean...
Kind of.
It's unbelievable. It's brilliant. And so...
Anyway, what was the story about Exmouth?
Just that there's whale sharks and manta rays that you can see from a plane. And so you get in the boat and Jimmy goes up in the plane or the helicopter above you and he's radioing down, spots them. Right. And then your man driving the boat drops you above the whale sharks or the manta rays. Right. And you just float down or dive down.
How do they know it's a whale shark and not a scary one?
Because a whale shark's the size of the Empire State Building.
Okay. Yeah.
You can literally see it from above.
But can you see other sharks? Pilot sharks?
No.
Pilot great white sharks that are the size of a pub in New York.
They just know that that's what's out there. Right. They know their sort of patch.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let you in harm's way. And there's somebody with you and the boat's never far.
Yeah. So you went all the way down to...
All the way down to Perth. We got to Perth and I got a job in Perth.
That's mental. That's... I shudder to think how many miles that is. This is showing your first signs of behaving like me, which is just going fuck it and just heading off somewhere for whatever, just to make yourself feel better or whatever.
Yeah.
And
but then I get to Perth and I get a call because my visa had run out and we couldn't sponsor you. And then I get a call, actually, we can sponsor you, will you come back? I'll never forget, I remember phoning my godfather, Frank Murphy, who's my dad's best friend and no blood relation and an incredible influence on my life. I phoned Frank and I said, Saatchi's want me to come back. And I talked to my dad and my dad said, fuck them. They said no once, don't go back to them. And then Frank said, they're your passports around the world, go back to them. I think the alternative was coming back to Dublin.
Well, indeed.
Do you know,
I mean, for someone at your age, it was clearly it was clearly a sign that they had plans for you, and that's also good.
But I think there was sort of a tipping point moment, whereas I'd only done, say, 18 months in an agency. You come back to Ireland, that's all you've had. You could have gone into the bank. There was definitely a moment where it said, right, come back and get another few years in the same place, and then you're a planner. At 18 months of experience, you're not really a planner.
So how long did you go back for?
I was 4 years all in.
Okay, so there was a year, and then the trip, and then
another year and a half or so.
And again, then what happened in Sydney that you just decided you wanted to shake it out?
Yeah, so then I got fired.
Why'd you get fired? So you're looking to the king of being fired here.
Yeah, that was an amazing experience, and I don't think very many people know that, because I sort of pretend that I seamlessly transitioned from Saatchi Sydney to Saatchi New York.
Well, I mean, let's stay on that. There's a thing with people which is like, you don't. It's as if there's something. Like it's a character flaw if you're being fired.
Absolutely.
And I'm like, fuck that. It's like, I've been fired from 7 fucking jobs, and I'm proud of it because, it's a question of how and why you're fired. If you're walking out of a place with your head held high and your conscience intact and your integrity intact, well, fuck them for firing you, Oh,
it was the best thing that ever happened to me. There was just a boss that there was really, because it was I was in a sort of a sub-planning department looking after some healthcare brands. There was a boss, Renee, and she and I, it seems, just didn't get along. Yeah. And I think in a way I was too big for my boots, and I was sort of pushing things further than they probably could have gone, and I was kicking up a stink about things that I just didn't agree with. And I think in such a small dynamic, they wanted peace in the land.
Well, I think to be fair to the firers, people who fired me or you, they have another side of the story. Sean's difficult to work with. Sean doesn't, play the game. Sean doesn't, whatever. And there are very justifiable reasons for it, in my view, as well. But I think it's about yourself.
Yeah.
I think when you get fired, it's about you. When you walk out that door and how you feel about yourself. Have you shafted people? Have you let people down? Have you been somebody who's betrayed what you stand for? And a lot of the time it is chemistry. A lot of the time someone just doesn't like the look at your face or sound your voice. But you've still got a few more fires left.
I think so.
Yeah. So the first fire is the hardest.
It was mortifying.
Yeah.
I thought my family were going to absolutely kill me. I remember thinking, they're just going to think I must be the worst at my job, and I was fired because I was incompetent.
Yeah.
And like you'd shafted somebody, or you just was unreliable and not good at what you were getting paid for.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain that that's not always the case.
I think it's great to happen early in your career, because actually it's one of those things like, I don't know, something, going to the dentist. It's like something that happens to you and you think is going to be really terrible. And then, 6 months later, it's big, so what?
Yeah. Well, thankfully, I carried it around, even in the US, for a few years as a secret.
Yeah.
Because when I came over to Saatchi New York with Mary Mills, everybody was like, oh, you were in the Saatchi office. And I said, yeah, I just transferred.
Okay. No, but people are afraid to say they were fired.
Yeah.
Everyone listening to this, if you've been fired, say you've been fired. And most of the time, if you've been fired because you've been working with tossers, then fine, say that, because most people find out about the fact that people were tossers who you're working for.
Yeah.
How long did you spend in Saatchi, New York?
3 years. Yeah.
And then why did you leave that?
It was going through an absolutely horrific time. So were all agencies, and I'm sure nearly all companies in New York, but like people, you'd come back from lunch and the person who you were sitting beside was no longer employed, and nobody mentioned it. Yeah. There was this toxic air. There was just like all of my favourite people had left, and everybody was in it for themselves. And at that point, if you lost your job, you probably couldn't get another job. So in a way you're like, no wonder you're in it for yourself. You've got a mortgage and 2 kids. You're probably going to throw anyone under the bus. But I felt
it was encouraged a little bit by management in a lot of the big agencies. I'm going to blame Martin Sorrell, even though it probably wasn't his fault, but that sort of WPP culture of the guy or girl in your position on another account you're in competition with, you're not colleagues, and that creates a as you said, a toxic politic going on at really low levels, which just causes a really unpleasant atmosphere.
So much anxiety,
tension and clenchedness,
and a lack of self-belief. Like you were afraid to fight for something you believed in.
Yeah.
No, like shut up and stay quiet.
Yeah. So you left, or what happened?
Yeah, it was around the time my sister and her boyfriend at the time were living in New Zealand, and I handed in my notice, went to New Zealand for a few weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, and then came and joined.
So did you leave because you just had enough?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I totally had enough. I remember feeling like nobody had my back, and I was still like a relatively young planner, and I didn't feel like anybody was trying to teach me.
Yeah.
And if you're only learning by osmosis, and nobody's looking out for you, maybe you're picking up bad habits.
And then
went to New Zealand.
I'm going to New Zealand for a few weeks. Okay. And your sister was out there with
her fiance, or her boyfriend Richie Crossland at the time.
Right.
And she met Richie in Scotland, and they were in love for many, many years, and they went travelling around the world together, as I said.
Yeah.
So anyway, he was in China. He had a pain in his back, and he was sort of putting Epsom salts on it and massages and all the rest. Wasn't getting any better, and that's kind of when it started. Anyway, they ended up in New Zealand, and long story short, that pain in his back was a metastasized tumour from his lung cancer.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
That he didn't know he had, obviously.
No. With no symptoms. He wasn't a smoker. He was 30, maybe maximum 29. And
so you got diagnosed in New Zealand?
Yeah. He had chemotherapy.
So is that why you went out just?
Yeah. If you get diagnosed with stage 4, there's not a stage 5.
Yeah.
And so it's sort of you begin to grasp at straws and try to find hope, I think, yeah. So they moved back to Scotland, and he was getting treatment in Glasgow until he passed away in July.
So July of what year that was?
8, 9, 10, 11.
11. Okay. And that had a pretty... You were very close with your sister. I remember it had a bad effect on you at the time, because I remember you kind of were updating me a lot about what was going on. You were going over and back. Yeah. So tell me what happened with you and your sis after that happened. Cause he was about 30 when he died, was he?
Yeah.
And they were engaged. And all that.
They were engaged. Yeah.
So and you were still here. Do you then kind of went a little bit kind of right? That's it again. Did you? That
took probably another 2 years for that to happen. But there's no doubt that something like that plants a seed in your mind and says, "What you only live once." Like, how did this happen? What did they do to deserve this pain and sadness? And I'm not there, and you question all your decisions of like, I'm back working late at Grey on a presentation about potato chips. Why is this more important than being with Orla? Like, but at the same time, that Orla's just like, I need to sort of deal with this in my own way. And so it was just so sad. And like, if you've never had tragedy hit your family, it affects the family unit. And you get cross with people even though it's not their fault. You're like, why aren't you being more supportive? Why are you being overbearing? And it's like, because I don't know how to deal with this. What am I supposed to do? Do I call her all the time? Do I not call her? Do I wait for her to call? Like, or even how much do we talk about Richie now that he's gone? Like things that you just landmines. So it's just
how is she now?
She's amazing.
Great.
Yeah, she's so amazing. She's in love again.
Great.
She met a new man.
Great.
A couple of years later.
That's what he would have wanted, I'm sure.
I'm sure they talked about it, and I'm sure it's what they want. Yeah, that he wanted. Another Scottish man. Yeah.
She has a thing for Scots.
She does.
How did you? What happened there inside your head, though? Because you were I think you felt very, you were questioning, as you said earlier, were you being supportive enough? And I guess as well that thing about the importance or lack thereof of what we are spending hours of our day bullshitting on about, and talking about whether that word or that word should appear on the jam ad. Eventually, people who are smart think about that.
Yeah.
So what happened then after that with you here?
Yeah, it was. I think that was a massive seed that was planted. Like, does any of this matter? What's important? What are your priorities? And a couple of things sort of just fell to shit, and you started getting very like burned out, and you put all this effort in, and you just sort of think, what's it for? And then you get a bit like the person you don't want to be, because I was,
which is what,
like, cynical.
Yeah.
I'm so anti being a cynic. I think it's toxic.
Yeah.
Like, you can question things and ask, you know, why is this the case? But if you're the person who's just jaded and not fun to be around, not fun to be around, but not a joy to be around, you're in the wrong job. I was asked to work on the Duracell pitch, and I remember thinking, no fucking way. I mean, this is a massive global piece of business that any other planner with their salt would have been happy to jump in and really figure out. And I sat down Howard and I said, Howard, I can't. I need to take some time off. And he was like 2 weeks.
Do you think any of this was how much of this might be either accentuated or because of the whole New York toxicity? Do you think if you were in San Francisco looking at the Bay or Sydney, do you think that same thing might have happened, or do you think it's compounded by this kind of rat racy feel that you have here?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say New York toxicity. I think I would call it New York intensity.
Right, okay. That's just my jaded cynicism.
I think it's just as like a dog year.
Yeah.
And, you know, after 5 years, I was just wrecked.
Yeah.
Like the kind of wreck.
They drive you hard.
Yeah. Like 80-hour weeks all the time.
Yeah.
And like you're cancelling on your friends and you're skipping dates. And
well, it's impossible. I had this theory as well that it was really hard to get dating with people because you'd have a good date and then you mightn't be able to see the person again for
2 weeks.
2 weeks. And I was convinced the people who were having relationships were people who came into New York in a relationship and had to get an apartment together and then would work out what their situation was and have to continue their relationship. What did you do then when you suddenly got this kind of not quite pass, but you said, I'm out of here?
Yeah.
What was going on through your head right then? Because you had this place, right? I
still had my little house that we're in now. And part of it was sort of logistics of like, how can I hold on to this and keep as many possible avenues forward? Everybody was saying to me, oh, you're done with New York. And I'm like, I don't know if I am. I mean, there was a question of, am I done with advertising? Yeah. Am I done with New York? Am I done with America, full stop? And so I wanted to sort of keep all of those avenues open and at the same time just sort of like go and figure it out. Vamoose, yeah.
Now, what was the trip?
So, started in Colombia. 4 of my friends came with me for the New York Girls, and it was over the 4th of July weekend. We went down to Cartagena, and then I did a 5-day hike. I did that on my own, up the mountains.
Did
unbelievable.
you go walk up a hill and come down a mountain?
I met a woman on the hike, and she said, this is harder than Kilimanjaro. And I thought it was like a walk.
Kilimanjaro is a piece of piss. Sorry.
So that was amazing. That was probably the highlight of the whole trip, that hike.
Was it a highlight for psychological as well as
like your 5 days, you carry the smallest backpack you've ever met in your life, and you sleep along the way. There's a little bench that someone slept in the night before.
It's like the one in Spain, right? That you walk for 1,000 kilometers.
The Camino. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like more like Peru and Machu Picchu.
And what was going through your head on the hike that was poignant?
I met this beautiful Australian woman, and she was gay. She is gay. And we had this amazing chat about sexuality and identity and how you sort of just be who you are and doesn't matter what everyone thinks. And she just had this very clear sense of self. And I remember thinking, oh, I'm not as clear about my sense of self. It wasn't to do with sexuality, just more of, you met her and it felt like she just knew who she was and was unapologetic about it.
Yeah.
And I was sort of jealous of that. Yeah. So
I think that's probably what we're all, those who think more than others, should be about. We're not always all about it, but I think trying to work out what you're about is as good a reason as, it's certainly better than working out what, the next chip at is going to be like. So when you came down that mountain trail, were you changed then a little bit?
No, I don't know if it was as profound as that. I mean, it was definitely the highlight, and I kept a diary every day.
Brilliant.
Which is brilliant. And I kept a diary and I wrote a book after the trip.
Okay.
Yeah. That I've published, but only for myself.
Right.
Because it was really a diary.
Yeah.
It was very much like, this is what I'm doing, but also what I'm thinking. And I could craft it into an interesting narrative and maybe publish it, but at the moment it feels sort of pure and honest and raw.
Right.
And I'm nervous that as soon as I share it with the world, I'll strip out things that I'm not ready yet to share
with the world and don't strip it out.
Yeah, maybe I'll get there.
Take off the layers, and once you've got nothing on, no one gives a shit. They only care when you're hiding shit. And you went from Colombia to, so you went all around South America?
No, just Colombia.
Okay.
And then I don't speak a lick of Spanish, and I thought, I don't know if I want to do Colombia or South America without Spanish.
Yeah.
I've never been to Asia. Right. Crazy. But I headed off to Southeast Asia, and I did Vietnam, Hong Kong, Cambodia, Burma and Thailand. It's kind of come full circle, and all the influences that I had, even through Ballygunner and beyond. And I was with one of my secondary school friends, Laura Butler from Waterford, came with me, and we did Burma together, and that was unbelievable. And it was so out of the way, and it felt like it was hard, and you had to spend 3 days in Thailand, in Bangkok, getting your visa, and it was sort of the price of this incredible trip that I can't recommend enough.
You got your head straight, would that be fair, from the trip, and said you were going to go back into the game?
Yeah, ish.
Right.
I was still in love with New York and in love with the idea of being a planner, but I think I had learned along the way an absolute ton of things that I was resolute about holding on to. And I came back, and then I met Droga, when I met Johnny Bauer, and then I started work 2 weeks later.
So Elaine now works for Droga 5. Ted Royer has been a guest on A Pint with Seaniebee, so you're the second Droga 5 person from it. And so have you found that? Ted says you're good.
Oh, does he? He's great. Yeah, it's been great. It's a very different type of agency. It's like independent, so you don't have a lot of Dan Martin Sorrell nonsense and the hierarchy of WPP.
It'd be interesting to see how if it follows the how big do we have to get before we get bad theory about ad agencies. Elaine, what would you say to your Ballygunner self of 20 years ago, 15 years ago, if you were looking back at your career? What would you say to that girl?
To the 20-year-old self? I think so much of it is like not to be afraid to fail. I think I had an awful lot of sort of overachiever in me, and I had very rarely fucked up, leaving throughout secondary school. And I was sort of on this classic path to university and all that sort of classic expectations. It was never not an option to do that. It was a foregone conclusion. And so in a way you're sort of like a cow on the back of a truck going to the slaughter. Like, it's just mapped out for you. And so as soon as you start to question, is this right for me? I think the better.
As soon as you become a Gary Larson cow. And start driving the truck.
As soon as you question. I think another thing maybe connected to that is like, don't just swallow whole what you've always been told.
That's good.
I was talking to somebody the other day about like beliefs and how much you actually question whether you believe this or were you told that this is what you believe. And someone was asking me
so much of life's about that. All the way back to our Catholic upbringing.
Totally. And like, why is because I was talking about how it's really hard, it's really important to work hard. And that's something I really believe. But the person was like, you clearly got that from your dad. Did you ever stop to question whether or not that's true? And so I would also just say, like, question and don't swallow whole what you've been told.
A fundamental bit of our lives is that we have to have a job. Says who? Why? Of course we're told to have a job so we have money. And of course we know we need money to buy food and shelter and have fun. But there's a lot of things. I think that's very wise. There's a lot of things in our lives that we take for, we're just told and we just accept blindly, that are always open to question. Are you positive about the future of like the planet and your own place in it?
Yeah, so it's interesting you bring that up. I'm going down to South by Southwest and I'm going to do a talk down there.
Oh, great.
The title of the talk is Inspiring Change Through a Connected World. And how essentially social media can help advance causes. And so I've been thinking a lot about how we can harness technology and the power of a community and to actually sort of create change, meaningful change. And whether or not social media has allowed us to abdicate all responsibility. Because all you have to do now is like something and share it. You don't have to get up and march.
It's the old turn your picture into the French flag on Facebook, and you've kind of done your bit. The Onion had a great headline, which was on the day of the Twin Towers, the week of the Twin Towers, because it was like everyone's going, what the hell are the Onion going to write about that? And it was like, woman not knowing what else to do bakes cake with American flag on it. Do you feel you have a wider life purpose than what you're doing now, or what you have been doing for the last while you've been advertising? Do you feel advertising is priming you for something else in your life later?
Yeah, but I don't think my job is connected to my purpose.
Right. Okay.
So I think they're disconnected. I think it's probably a mistake to conflate the two.
Okay.
So
have you worked out what that purpose is, or are you going to ask me to come back in a few years? Then tell me.
No, I really do think that it's your own purpose. Your purpose in life is to figure out, what makes you happy based on who you are. And that literally takes your whole life. Right. And that changes as you grow up. And the more you can sort of be self-aware and in tune with that, the better. And once you figure out that, then you've just got this sort of freedom to be who you are, unapologetically. And I think that's actually really liberating for those around you.
Wise words to finish on, I think. Elaine, thank you so much for having me around at your apartment. I knew we'd have a great chat because we're both yappers.
My pleasure.
And best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Johnny.